Oh, thank you. Great. Can you move it a little closer? Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kobe. Hello, hello. Let's see how it's going. Myrna, hiya. How are you? Tomorrow's swim day? Myrna? Everybody's going to be jealous when they look at it, when they see this. Today is going to be my last day using my phone. I'm going to figure out how to do it on my computer because it's not uploading correctly. So I'm going to be in the vertical position today. Hi, Sherry. How are you? We'll start in a few minutes. Okay. Patrice, my savior, is on. What puzzle are you doing today, Patrice? I just want everybody to know Patrice is the puzzle whiz, and the puzzle business is doing very well since we have classes. I'm happy to have you here, Sherry, and I will text you later. Oh, I know what I forgot to do. I forgot to get an address. Sarah Lydia from Jerusalem. Wow, it's very few hours away from Lag Bomer in Jerusalem, from when you're going to be with Rebbe Shimon. Patrice, what do you mean you don't have one tonight? Oh no, maybe you could break one up and do it again. Patrice is the jigsaw puzzle queen. Anyway, l'chaim, everybody. Tonight is a very exciting night. First thing, I'm back in Los Angeles, so I'm very happy to be here, although I'm very sad to miss teaching at 11 p.m. from Miami. And thanks, Myrna. Tomorrow night is the Happy Minyan is having the Moshe Band concert. And I'm actually going to my first concert since last February. That's almost a year and many, many months. Oh, Sherry, this is exciting. You'll have somebody to give your puzzles to. Sherry's trying to give me her things, and I'm trying to not take them. Yes, Patrice is in LA. So for anybody who is just coming on, Fran, hi, and hope everybody is having a good week. The weather is turning nicer, so as the weather turns nicer, I become happier. So I want to start off tonight with a few dedications and a story. And, okay, so today was the yahrzeit of a very special man. I mean, everybody's actually very special. That's really the real truth. And his name is Aryeh Leib Kaplan, and he was one of the founders of the revival of the Chabad community in Sfat. And hi, Yana from Texas. We have Texas, Los Angeles, Burbank, Jerusalem. Pretty soon we're going to have some more places. So Rabbi Kaplan was the founder. He was sent by the Lubavitch Rebbe in 1973, along with a few other families, to really create what Sfat has become today. And I'll just tell you an interesting story. So Rabbi Kaplan is a Lubavitcher, and you know, like for many of you that know Lubavitchers, you know that most of them dress in black coats and white shirts, and there's a certain look they always have. And for anybody who knew my husband, they know that he actually didn't have that look. So my husband was walking in Sfat one day, and he knew Rabbi Kaplan very well from when they were Bachram, young boys in yeshiva. And Rabbi Kaplan screeches his car to a halt, and he gets out of the car, and hi, Jill. And he looks at my husband, and he looks him like up and down from top to bottom. And my husband is wearing like white shorts, a tie-dyed T-shirt, his tzitzits over his t-shirt, and flip-flops, which is not the typical Chabad dress. And Rabbi Kaplan just looks him up from up and down and just gets back in his car and drives away. So, but they cared about each other, and even though they might have dressed differently, they really worked together and were dedicated to the Lubavitch Rebbe and the work of the Rebbe. And Rabbi Kaplan was on a mission for the Rebbe in Russia, and he was tragically killed in a car accident. And his family has carried on today. He has a wife who's a wonderful teacher. She's in Sfat. And I'm hoping that in the summer, in part of the summer, I will be able to transmit my classes from Sfat. You know, that's what I think that's made this Facebook class so exciting, is that now nobody can complain when I'm not in class, because that I go away to Florida and to New York and to Boston and soon to Nashville, Tennessee, and to Israel, because now I can always, no matter what time of day, be 8 p.m. in Los Angeles. So, okay. So I want to dedicate the class to Rabbi Kaplan tonight. It's his yahrzeit today. Also, to two people. One was a grandmother, a beloved mother and grandmother. Her name was Rajul Prada Doshi. And her son, who was an older son, an adult, Sujan Malbora. These are two wonderful people who passed away tragically this week from COVID in India. I have a son who works for a company, and his boss is Indian, and I have met him, and these are his family members. And we need to really increase our prayers for everybody all over the world, in particular for these countries where person after person after person, where there's not enough help. And I have to say, you know, I lived in India many years, and I travel to India every year, and the people are beautiful. I mean, people everywhere are beautiful, but people in India are caring and believe in God and so committed to friendship and warmth, and they're being just knocked down one after the other. So our prayers go out to these families, and really we pray for complete healing for the whole entire world, and that really means Mashiach, and that's the direction we're going in, and that is the level that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we're going to study about a little later in this class, lived on. It's also, this week was the yahrzeit of the Chernobyl Rebbe, Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl. And so I actually would like to tell a story about him to begin this year. So the Chernobyl Rebbe, he was very, very well known. He traveled to all the outlying communities, like Bakersfield, Lancaster, you know, those communities where there are very few Jews and very few opportunity, although today Chabad is in almost all those cities, but many years ago it wasn't, and where they had no opportunity to have rabbis or a contact with rabbis at all. And he would travel, and he would educate them, he would ask questions, and he also had a tzedakah fund. And he wore a coat with many, many pockets, and each pocket was dedicated to a different fund, a different tzedakah fund. And there are many, many stories about him, about his abilities to help people, but not only living people. It says that he took care of wandering souls that for whatever reason in the world did not find peace at death. And there is one magnificent story I would like to tell one day, but it's not going to be today, about a woman, Miriam Bas Bilgaz. So if somebody will remind me when we have a gap in the learning, I'd love to share that story with you. But he took care of these wandering souls that couldn't find peace. So here is the story about him. He traveled one time. He went to a city, and there was a very, very wealthy man. His name was Zalman Lev, that lived in the city, and he was a Judaica collector. And there was another man in the town who he knew, and this man had an inheritance of an absolutely beautiful silver menorah. And Zalman Lev being a collector of Judaica and a lover of Judaica, offered him money, offered him anything he wanted to buy it from him. And because it was an inheritance, this man would not sell it. And at one time, this man had a lot of very bitter debts. He was just in debts. There was nowhere he could turn for money. And he came to Zalman Lev and he asked him for a loan of 1,000 rubles. Rupees is India. Rubles was Poland and Russia. Rubles. And Zalman Lev said to him, I will give you 1,000, probably won't be enough for you. I'll loan you 2,000, but the collateral I want is your silver menorah. And he thought to himself, if he gives him 2,000 and not 1,000, he'll never be able to pay the 2,000 back. And that way he will be in possession of this menorah. And that is exactly what happened, is the man was in such financial straits, he could not pay the 2,000 back. And finally he died, and he eventually passed away. So the menorah stayed in the possession of Zalman Lev. So one day the Chernobyl Rebbe passed through the city, and this man wanted to be his host. And because to host a great Rebbe was always a very big honor for whoever was hosting him. And he hosted him, and at the end of the visit, he said to him, I'm so grateful that you stayed with me. I want to give you anything from my possessions. I want to give you a gift. Here, and he took him to his silver closet, and he opened it up, and he says, please, I want you to take anything. And the Chernobyl Rebbe pointed to the menorah. And he said, no, anything but the menorah. I will absolutely, please choose something else. I will give you anything but the menorah. And the Rebbe said, no, I want that. That's what I want. And I'm not leaving without it. Very unusual for a Rebbe. So reluctantly, he gave it to him as a gift. And then the Chernobyl took it home, and he gave it to one of his attendants. And he said, put it in the back of the closet. And that was it. And it stayed there for 15 years. He never looked at it. He never took it out. At the end of 15 years, he asked his gabbai, his assistant, to bring it to him for Hanukkah. It was Hanukkah that week. And he lit the menorah the first night. And he sat there for hours and hours and hours looking at the menorah. And finally, some of the Hasidim came, and he said, I want to tell you about this menorah. And he said that he knew, through his ways of knowledge, he was a Rebbe, that Zalman Lev had passed away that year. And that when he stood in front of the Beis Din Lamala, the high court on high, that they had a difficulty with him. That he did give a loan. Now, to loan somebody money is a very big mitzvah. But when he took the menorah as collateral, he took pain from the owner of the menorah. And because of that, because of the pain he caused to another Jew, his soul could not pass on. His soul could not find eternal rest. And the Chernobyl Rebbe said that when he came into the home and he saw the menorah, he knew that there was going to be a problem in the future. And he said, now by lighting it for Hanukkah, that was what helped his soul pass away. So this week, we're in this sphere of Hod. And Hod has to do with Hoda'ah, recognition, beauty, and a connection with God. So that we have to come to our highest selves, and this is what the Chernobyl Rebbe was teaching to his Hasidim when he took the menorah, knowing that one day he would have to kind of help free the soul to go to its eternal rest. Okay. Interesting story. Some of these stories are very interesting. So this week's Parsha, we're going to study the Parsha right now, and then we're going to study about the holy day of Lag Bomer. So this month, we're in the month of Iyar. Next week, actually, is my daughter Aura's birthday, and it's my grandmother, who she's named for, Grandma Minnie, Aura Mindel, her yahrzeit. And I remember my grandmother was held on to her Yiddishkeit in my home, and she always lit Shabbos candles every Friday night, and she would put a napkin on her head. And or a doily. I'm sure many of you had grandmothers who put doilies on their head, and I never got it. Like, I never understood until I returned to Jerusalem and I started to get more involved in my Judaism, and I knew women covered their hair. And then I understood, aha, the napkin was to have her hair covered when she said the blessing. So this month of Iyar, it says, has an advantage over every other month in the year, because every single day of this month is connected with the mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. And it says, you shall count for yourselves from the morrow after the day of rest. From that day you brought the wave offering. Up to the morrow after the 7th week, you shall count 50 days. And this is the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer. We count every day from the 16th of Nisan, which is the second day of Pesach, up to but not including the day of Shavuos. And that's the period of time we're in. So in the month of Nisan, only the second half of the month is involved with counting the Omer. In the month of Sivan, which is coming after the month of Iyar, only a few days, the first few days, we count the Omer. But in the month of Iyar, every single day, we count the Omer. And the advantage of Iyar is related to exactly this, working on one's soul through the counting of the Omer. So in all special times, there's usually a relationship between the mitzvah and that particular day itself. Meaning there is a mitzvah to eat matzah on Passover. And eating matzah is distinct from the day on which it is observed. It says that the obligation to eat happens to be on that day. So the Torah ordains the eating of matzah, and we know that the eating of chametz, of leavened products, is forbidden from the eve of Pesach until the end of Pesach. But it says that you're only obligated to eat matzah the first night of Pesach. The other days you don't have to eat the matzah, but you have to do it on the first day. So the unique quality of the month of Iyar is that all the days of the month are bound up with the mitzvah of counting. And it relates to each day that is counted, and all the days that we count in this period are affected. We're including every day that is passed. So when we count tonight, when we counted last night, so last night was the 31st day of the Omer, that we're bringing along from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the days that preceded it, and all the days that are coming ahead. And this is how we are preparing for Kabbalah's HaTorah, to receive the Torah on Shavuos that comes immediately after the counting. So the month of Iyar is unique because every day has something that's shared that is alike. So in every month, there are differences between the first part of the month and the second part of the month. It's interesting. There are more auspicious days connected to a certain part of the month, less auspicious to the other. And the 12 months of the year correspond to 12 different letter combinations of the letters in the divine name of God. The Yud, and then the Hey, and then the Vav, and then the Hey. So just like it's called the Tetragrammaton, has 4 letters, so every month has 4 weeks. And if there is an additional day, let's say some weeks have a few extra days left over, they're attached and absorbed in that original 4 weeks. So also in this holy name of God, the Tetragrammaton, each letter is distinct in rank and quality from all the other letters. So it says in the first half is a Yud and a Hey, and it has a different quality from the second Yud and Hey in the name. And the same applies to every month. Each week is distinct from the other weeks. And the first 2 weeks are compounded together, and then the second 2 weeks are compounded together. So it says that all this does have a practical implication in terms of weddings. I only learned this when my oldest daughter was getting married, that there's a more auspicious time in the month to get married, et cetera, et cetera. So in the month of ER, this month we're in, all the days are equal with regard to the spiritual work of a person. So this is a very unique month we're in. The month is not over. We haven't missed the opportunity to hook ourselves into the power of this month. So it says ER, the name ER is spelled Aleph Yud Yud Resh. It's an acronym for Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Rachel, who are our 4 ancestors who signify the principle of what we call the Merkava, which is the divine chariot. This is a call for your Kabbalah seatbelts. I hope they're on. So it says the 3 patriarchs and the 1 matriarch that make up the chariot, this divine chariot, signify the compound of attributes that will form this chariot together. This is all talked about in the Zohar, and we're going to address the Zohar in the second half of this class. So the concept of a chariot is explained in Tanya also to signify that all its parts are holy and all its parts are detached from the mundane. That meaning that there is no self-interest, because the mundane has the quality of self-interest. There's no self-interest. So when it says, even in physical involvements, which says, in all your ways, know God in all your ways, have submission to divinity, just like a chariot that serves, but the will of the charioteer is carried out by the chariot. The chariot has no will of its own. In case you saw Ben-Hur when you were younger, one of the few movies I saw, and there's a chariot, you'll know what a chariot looks like. And it says that when you are a chariot, then all the days are equal, because one's total sense of reality is only godliness. The chariot is only doing the will of God. So the spiritual work in this month, in the sense of being a chariot in this month of ER, means that this month stands between the month of Nisan, which is the month of Egypt, going out of Egypt, and the month of Sivan, which is receiving the Torah. And during the month of Exodus, it says, when you will have brought the people out of Egypt for the purpose of what? Serving God on this mountain. The whole purpose is to serve God. And it says, and how do we do it? By way of what we call Kabbalah's Ol, which we've studied many times in this class. It's a very hard concept. That's why we study it over and over and over, which means submitting to the heavenly yoke. Just like when you have an ox and you put a yoke on the ox and it has blinders and it can only go in the direction you're taking it. It doesn't veer to the left and it doesn't veer to the right. And the third month, Nisan is the first month of the year. ER is the second. And the third month is the month of Sivan. And it says the threefold Torah was given to the threefold people. So the the scriptures consist of Torah, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim. And the threefold people are the Kohanim, the Levim, and the Yisrael. So we are a threefold people with a threefold Torah. And the Torah says about the going out, the exodus from Egypt, when you will have brought the people out of Egypt, you will serve God on this mountain. Many people forget the second part of the sentence, let my people go to serve me. They like the going part. They might not like the serving part so much. So the giving of the Torah was the whole entire purpose of the Exodus. And in between the Exodus from Egypt and the receiving of the Torah is this period that we're in called Sfirat HaOmer. And in order to achieve the purpose, the ultimate purpose of the going out of Egypt, the leaving is the counting of the days, the rectifying of our souls, the rectifying of our spiritual qualities. And we're going to go into that a little more. So, and in order to receive the Torah, we're rectifying ourselves to be pure vessels to receive the Torah. So the first 3 months are, again, Nisan, which is the time of going out of Egypt, Iyar, the time of the counting of the Omer, and Sivan, the time of the giving of the Torah. And I just want to see where there's the footnote. And the first days of the month of Sivan are still part of the counting of the Torah. And Rosh Chodesh Sivan is already the completion of the first 3 days of the 7 weeks. So we're going to go into, remember, we're counting for 7 weeks. We're counting for 7 days and 7 days in 7 weeks. I just want to comment to Lisa. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I appreciate you being happy to be here. I'm also happy to be here. Okay. So, let me go over the 7 weeks. So each of the 7 weeks of the Sfirat HaOmer, it signifies one of the 7 attributes, one of the 7 emotive attributes. We have chesed, loving kindness, gevura, severity, boundaries, restraint, tiferet, beauty, netzach. Netzach is perseverance, Hod is splendor, Yesod is foundation, and Malchus is royalty. And each of these, they're called midot, and each of them compounds the aspect of all others. So each subdivides. So we have chesed of chesed, gevura of chesed, tiferet of chesed, and so forth. So these, in the 7 weeks, there are 7 subcategories of each of the attributes, and they're signified by the 7 days of each week. So the first 3, Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes, when we say them together, they're abbreviated into one acronym called Hagas. And they are the general principle of all the attributes. And the remaining ones are kind of branches off that. So we might go into that a little later. So Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the first day of the month of Sivan, is the 45th day of Sfiras HaOmer. And it's the 3rd day of the 7th week, which means it's called Tiferes Shebo Malchus. And it says that this day includes all the 7 middos of the last week is included in it, and the ones going forward to come. So the principal aspect of the month of Sivan is not the counting, it's really the receiving of the Torah, because in the 3rd month we came to the desert of Mount Sinai, and then the threefold Torah was given in the 3rd month. So the months of the year, all the months of the year are related to Nisan. I know many people think that Tishrei, when Rosh Hashanah comes, is the first of the year, the 1st month, but it's not. It's actually the 7th month. And I have to say, it took me many years to get that concept. So if people think it's the beginning, you were just like me. I kept thinking, yeah, that's the beginning, but it's not. Nisan is the beginning. It's the birth of the nation. When we left Egypt, when we fled Egypt, that was the birth of the Jewish nation. So that these 3 months signify 3 aspects. One is the actual leaving of Egypt. One is the counting of the Omer. One is the giving of the Torah. And these are all levels in the going out of Egypt. The going out of Egypt was only completed upon receiving the Torah. So Pesach, we know, is related to the eating of the matzah. The Sfirat HaOmer is related to barley. All meal offerings consist of wheat except for the meal offering of jealousy, and the meal offering of the Omer. Both are barley. Why? Because barley was considered animal food. We like our barley, but it was considered animal food. And what is Shavuos related to? It's related to chametz again. It's related to loaves of bread that are baked from chametz. So a question is asked, why should the Omer be of barley? And why should it be different than the other meal offerings? So the Mishnah tells us that a meal offering of jealousy must be of barley. And it's talking about the behavior of an animal. And it's saying that when we are counting the days of the Omer, we are working on rectifying our animal soul, because our divine soul is always holy. It doesn't deviate from holiness. It's only the animal soul that needs to be rectified. So that's why the offering is an animal offering. Chametz is prohibited on Pesach because chametz is the cause of conceit and arrogance, and is symbolic of what we call the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. But that is really only during the time of Pesach. The question is, why is chametz permitted all year round? And on Shavuos, it's not only permitted, but it's required. You have to have 2 loaves made specifically of chametz. So these three aspects of these 3 months are alluded to in a verse that says, "Draw me, and we will run after you. The king has brought me into his chambers." It's from the Song of Songs. Draw me refers to the time of Exodus. We will run after you refers to the time of Sfirat HaOmer. And the king has brought me into his chambers refers to the giving of the Torah. So there is a number of differences, or there are a number of differences between the term to draw me and to run after you. Draw me is the expression of drawing forth, pulling. Running is an expression of what it says, running. So when we say draw me, it means you, meaning draw me. The community of Israel is requesting of God, draw me from above. The running, narutza, we shall run, means we will do that on our own from below upwards. So the drawing is God draws from above, draws from above to below, and the running is where we're going from below to above. And draw me is in the singular, and we shall run is in the plural. Meaning that we are one people when God is drawing us out, and we are multiples when we're running after God. At the time of the Exodus, the Jews were submerged in what we call the 49 gates of impurity. Not they, because it's a we, did not have a vessel left to absorb godliness. It says that we were naked and bare. Naked and bare means naked of mitzvahs. And God revealed himself and pulled the Jews out of Egypt. So the redemption from Egypt was not due at all to the virtue of the Jewish people's own avoda, their spiritual work, but only because of the divine light that came from above. And this manifestation of this divine light did not transform our beings, the Jews' beings, because they didn't have a vessel prepared that could absorb that divine light. It was merely that they were drawn out and drawn to divinity, but it could not transform because there was no vessel to contain that light. So it follows that this manifestation of the divine light which comes through each of our divine soul, has to have a vessel that's sensitive to divinity. So the animal soul, it did not affect the animal soul. So at the time of the Exodus, when the divine soul was drawn out of the physical Egypt, the animal soul was still stuck in the person. The person was not freed from the evil inside them because the animal soul remained at its full intensity. So the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, explains the phrase, "for the people fled." At first glance, this is difficult to understand. If Pharaoh had been told to liberate the Jews permanently, he would have had to do so. Then why did they have to flee? The Alter Rebbe is explaining that the evil in the souls of the Jews was still in its full intensity at the time of the Exodus, and the only way that they could get out of Egypt was to flee. I just want to say, since I take off my glasses, I can read notes. And my dear friend Stella said that tomorrow night, oh wow, Lag Bomer is her mother's 9th yahrzeit. And I just have to interrupt myself to tell a story about Stella's mother. So we were at a restaurant. I think there was Sheva Brachos or something for one of Stella's kids. And, there's some famous rock musician. Stella's going to have to write me. I can't remember his name. I cannot remember his name. Who is a friend of many of ours. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was very famous. He was in a band called Jane's Addiction. He was... Sarah Zulaf will know, okay, who that is. And he comes into the restaurant, and Stella's mother, Devorah Bas, your father's name for an Elias HaNeshama, Perry Farrell. So Perry Farrell comes in, and Stella's mother looks at him and says, "Get a haircut." That was like, okay, so she was a beautiful woman with a lot of chayas, and her soul should have an elevation and be dancing with Rabbi Shimon and bring us all along with her, with Mashiach. Okay, so it says that the Jews had to flee. They just had to flee. So, so this drawing forth means that there's no change in the essence of the Jewish people, except they moved from Egypt into traveling through the desert to get to Mount Sinai. Drawing from above at the time of the Exodus there was no work. They did not do it at all. And it says that drawing forth is said in the singular because the manifestation of the divine light at the time of the Exodus affected only the divine soul and not the animal soul. So it was only addressing to the divine soul. So the ultimate end is for the divine soul to refine and sublimate the animal soul. And that, we all know, is a tough job. If only the divine soul mattered, if that only mattered, we would be basking in, heaven. Pie in the sky, whatever we're going to get there. Tofu pie in the sky. And there would be no need for the world. But the divine soul does not need any mending at all. And the ultimate purpose of the divine soul's descent into the world is to refine and to sublimate the animal soul. That is our purpose. We need to refine our animal souls. And it is written, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart." And our sages comment and say it's with both inclinations, with the good inclination and the evil inclination. And when the divine soul refines the animal soul, it's an elevation for everyone. and it that's what we're doing. That's our work. We have to refine. And it says man is different than an animal. We have intellect, desires, emotions. And therefore the intellect can weaken the emotions by virtue of its power to control them. It says the brain rules over the heart by its very nature. And a person was created in such a way with willpower in their brain that they can restrain themselves and control the drive of the lust in the heart, preventing the heart's desire from expressing itself in action, word, or thought, and to divert the attention from the craving of the heart into the opposite direction, into the realm of holiness. There's a phrase from Tanya that the brain rules over the heart, and I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it in brief, that there was, when Napoleon was in battle with Russia, the Alter Rebbe was on the side of Russia, even though Russia was horrible to the Jews, because he knew that liberty, fraternity, and equality would mean tremendous assimilation and the downfall of the Jewish nation. And today we have like a 72% intermarriage rate and tremendous assimilation and from liberty, fraternity, and equality. So the Alter Rebbe was I can't say rooting, it would be disrespectful, but was on the side of hoping that the Russians would win, and he had a spy in Napoleon's camp. And the French were losing, and the Russians were finding out all their positions way ahead of time, and Napoleon realized he had a spy within his general's camp, in his main camp. And one of the Hasidim, who was dressed as an ordinary Frenchman and an ordinary, officer in the French army, he was in that tent, and Napoleon came in one day and he said, "You are the spy," and he immediately put his hand over his heart, and the man's heart was just beating evenly, and he said, "Oh, you're not." And when he came back and he told the Alter Rebbe this, he said, because of the concept in Hasidus that the mind can rule over the heart, exactly what we're talking about here, that the intellect is created, man was created in such a way with willpower in the brain that one can restrain themselves and control the drive of lust in their heart, preventing the heart's desire from expressing itself in action, word, or thought. So one has the ability, even in such a situation, to control the heart. And it says with the animal, however, all its desires are very intense. And it says also with each person, the will or desire of the divine soul is not as intense as that of the animal soul. Anybody who tries to go on a diet, my Weight Watcher examples for the last 20 years, anybody can understand that the desire of the animal soul, that animal desire, is very, very powerful. And if the divine soul affects the animal soul to the point that the animal's will express itself with great intensity and direct that intensity toward godliness, then the divine soul also will have even a greater intense will for godliness. So we want to harness that animal soul and use it in the service of God. And now we can come to understand why the meal offering of the bomer was to be of barley, which is animal food. For the bomer signifies what we call the birur, the refinement of the animal soul. That's what we're doing every day that we are counting the bomer. We are refining the animal soul. And it says also that a person's emotive traits, a person's midos, their attributes, are refined by means of contemplation, hisponidus. For the contemplation on godliness, on Elokus, will arouse in the person feelings of love and awe. And there is a teaching in the Tanya, and it says that if a person doesn't feel that arousal of those feelings of love and awe, but they can conceive in their mind that it could be possible that they would have those feelings of love and awe, then it is attributed to them as if they had that feeling. And it says that the beginning of a person's spiritual work, when one is immersed in impurity and likely to violate Torah law, is not a proper time for contemplation. In the early stages of a person's spiritual avodas, person's spiritual work, there must be an approach of the people fled, just like they fled out of Egypt, to subdue oneself and to flee from evil. And therefore, when out of Egypt, the nakedness of the earth, one is no longer attracted to forbidden pleasures, but one still needs to subdue the desire to indulge in permissible pleasures. That is the time for this hispodadus. That is the time for the contemplation and then the transformation of the attributes at their very core. This is such deep work. This is really a lifetime of work that because when we can control ourselves in permissible pleasures, it's like you're harnessing the animal soul, because what is permitted, but it doesn't need to be indulged in. And when we contemplate on godliness from that point in our life and then come to the quality of transformation, even for a moment, it builds each time, and we can strengthen our spiritual core. So there's the principle of suppressing or subduing inclinations to indulge in mundane desires by disassociating with them. And when you are in complete control of yourself, you can move to the next level. And then we convert or transform the natural emotions or inclinations. And how do we do that? By contemplating on holiness. Even if it's a small amount of time a day, it doesn't have to be all day. We don't have to be so steeped. It doesn't have to be impossible. It's like exercise. You can start with 5 minutes a day and build up until that 26-mile marathon is within your reach. So we have the ability to do this in our spiritual work. And we have to have patience and commitment. So running out, there's the term narutza, which means running, is opposed to walking. So the desires of the animal soul are intense, as we've talked about and seen. And when a person's spiritual work achieves that the animal soul will also desire godliness, the desire for godliness will be more intense than the one of the divine soul. So that power is invaluable to have, that we can come to have that with our animal soul, that strong desire for godliness, and we will feel it more than we will with the divine soul. And we shall run means by our own initiative from below upwards, because that's the result of our contemplation, and that's the result of our spiritual work. And this is, narutza is in the plural, because we're talking about working not only with the divine soul, but also working with the animal soul. And it says running relates to, again, the divine and the animal soul, because the divine soul is limited, but it is the one that is inspiring the running towards godliness in the animal soul. And then it also it'll be a race. The animal soul and the divine soul are running together. And that's how we're elevating the divine soul. So after all this work of counting the different days in the Sfiras HaOmer, then we come to the revelation of the giving of the Torah. And this revelation can create within us the nullification of the self, meaning our personal significance is lessened in order to serve God. Does not mean being a shmata. You're never supposed to be a shmata. It means that we're putting aside the sense of ego, the sense of self-awareness, the sense of, well, I think, I want to do. A refinement of the midos of these attributes is not a nullification for the self, because it's rooted in the self. It's rooted in the intellect. It's rooted in the contemplation. You are the ones doing it. You are in charge. So there's still self-awareness, but at the time when the voice of God was heard giving the Torah, it says that the souls took flight at each divine utterance. So it goes on now to talk about why we can see why chametz is permitted all year round, to the point that it's an obligation on Shavuos, even though it's totally forbidden on Pesach. So it says, at the beginning of one's spiritual work, at the beginning of one's avoda, when the evil in a person is very intense, one must put aside the intellect because they are wise to do evil, meaning you can talk yourself into anything and you can rationalize anything with especially if you're smart. And during Sfiras HaOmer, in the midst of your spiritual work, you're able to use the intellect because you're harnessing it. You're taking it out of its freedom to do anything, and you're harnessing it. So the Sfiras HaOmer, it says, the Sfiras HaOmer has the effect of sifting out all the evil, and until one reaches a level of serving God and wanting godliness alone. And at that point, we bring back in the chametz, because one's intellect or reasoning has to be the vessel for godliness. Otherwise, why be here? Otherwise, we could be angels up in the heaven. So it says that there's a little mushal that's given, a parable, that this is compared to a king who had a child who fell sick. And one day the child desired to eat, and the king said, first let the child consume the medication, and no other food should be in the house until then. And that's what happened. And after the medication was consumed, the king said, from now on, the child can eat whatever the child desires because it will not come to harm. So it says, similarly, when Israel left Egypt, they did not know the principle and mystery of what's called the faith. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, let Israel taste the medication. And the medication was the matzah, because we call the matzah the bread of emunah, the bread of faith. And before taking the medication, no other food is to be seen, meaning no chametz. After they eat the matzah, which is the medication to enter and know the mystery of the faith, the Holy One, blessed be He, says, from now on, chametz can be seen and can be eaten because it can no longer harm them. So this applies to Shavuos. I mean, this stuff is just breathtakingly beautiful. That when the spiritual sustenance, which is a complete healing, was provided for them. So by the time we get to Shavuos, we can have a complete healing. And it's never too late. So that if you haven't worked on rectifying these different aspects of one's soul, nothing wrong with today. So it says, it was taught by the Maggid of Mezrich, Usavarta lachem, you shall count for yourselves. And I want to just read from another text. You shall count is an idiom of the word sapirut, brilliance or brightness. You should make bright yourselves, your human reality. So the word for you must count can also be translated as you must make bright. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, interpreted this verse as follows. You must make yourselves bright. Purify yourself until your inner holiness shines forth, illuminating your life. This is accomplished by working on the 7 weeks. Refine the 7 emotional attributes of your human animal soul. Love, awe, mercy, confidence, sincerity, truth, humility. They must be complete. The way to refine them is to train them to work together. For example, love of God inspires us to draw closer to Him. Awe of God makes us feel unworthy of doing so. Yet our awareness of how much God wants us to draw close to Him, despite our unworthiness, inspires us to draw even closer. The same awareness is how much He wants us to draw close to Him, makes us want to draw closer, and each emotion increases the intensity of the other. I just want to say my adopted daughter, Shirley Perlis, is telling us today is the 5th year anniversary of her kidney transplant. Shirley and everyone else should have complete healing and should go on to, as it says here, to shine. Your brilliance and your kindness and your love should continue to shine. So l'chaim for Shirley and her great health. And if anybody is looking for a great acupuncturist, it's Shirley. Okay. So our sages say, in every generation and every single day, a person is obligated to regard themselves as if they had come out of Egypt. Because Egypt comes from the word, Egypt is Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim's root is Metzer, narrowness. So we have to go out of our limitations and our narrowness every single day. And we have to experience this going out of Egypt. And it's relevant every day, and especially today. Every day, today. Today. And the very beginning of the daily spiritual work is the recitation of Modeh Ani, the prayer of thanksgiving that's recited every morning immediately upon awakening, making one conscious of God who stands above them. And if you don't know how to say Modeh Ani, just say thank you. That's also good. I praise God, the principle of praise, hoda'ah, thanksgiving, acknowledgement. So at that point, one is beyond reason and beyond sentiment. But we submit ourselves to godliness. And the beginning of the daily avoda, the daily spiritual work, is like the going out of Egypt that we had in the month of Nisan. And the next stage in the daily spiritual work is saying the prayers of praise, the blessings of the Shema, saying the Shema itself, contemplation. What does the Shema say? It means hear. Hear, O Israel. Hear in the sense of understanding and apprehension, contemplation and consciousness of divine grace and supremacy. And this is also works in transforming our midas to come to the highest levels of love of God, which is what? With all your heart and with all your soul, and even with all your might. And this is like the month of Iyar that's bound up with the rectification and the counting. And there, in all of this, remains a sense of self-awareness, but then we move to the next stage, which is like the silent prayer, when one stands like a servant before their master. And this is saying, God, open my lips. I'm so nullified that I need you to open my lips. And we become like one who is receiving the Torah. So we can now understand why it's written from the morrow after the Shabbos that we begin to count the Omer, because the refinement and sublimation of the animal soul requires a very sublime power. For the higher something is, the lower it can descend. So this is analogous to the Exodus from Egypt. At the time, the people were immersed in the 49th gates of impurity. There was a need for divine manifestation. For that alone was able to extricate the people from being on the 49th level of impurity. And Rabbi Isaac Laurier, teaches that angels would have been unable to extricate anyone from Egypt and would have become trapped there. And this is why the Torah says, from the morrow after Shabbos, because Shabbos is the highest level in time. But it's still a part of time, and it's an integral part of the cycle of the 7 days of the week. And in this cycle of 7 days, Shabbos is the highest level. And it says, God completed his work on the seventh day. And what did the world lack? It lacked rest. Shabbos rest, and then rest came. And the rest is relevant. Rest doesn't mean, like lying in your bed for 18 hours. Okay? The rest of Shabbos is relevant and related to the reality of the world. And the morrow after the Shabbos is a higher level. It transcends the Shabbos itself. And it's a light that transcends the order of the creative process. And this is the meaning of you shall count for yourselves from the morrow after the Shabbat. That to take 49 days would signify all the levels of the emotive traits of the animal soul that we've gone over before, of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus, and to refine and sublimate them, to make them brilliant, to make them shine with brightness. And this requires an infusion from the morrow after the Shabbat, from beyond the normative. We have to transcend. We have to go to the transcendent level. So I want to do one more thing on the Parsha, and then we're going to talk about Lag Bomer. I'm very excited about Lag Bomer, even though we're not there in Maron by Rabbi Shimon, but we are going to tell some stories and learn some deep Torah from Rabbi Shimon. Also, this Parsha Emor, means that you should say. It's the concept of speaking with praise, speaking with soft speech. No, Myrna, I'm not going to tell it tonight, Miriam Bas Bilga. We're going to save it for another class when we don't have so much to learn in one night. So you'll remind me one day. So the concept where there's an emphasis on this word to say. Say, you should. It's like say you should say. Educate. It's saying educate the younger ones. It's saying, hey, adults, don't forget to educate the kids. Don't forget to tell the kids. Don't eat this is told to us in the Parsha of Shmini, what we should and shouldn't eat. What's an abomination? In Parshas Achrei, everyone, it says, don't eat blood. Adults, don't forget to tell the kids that. About Kohanim, it says, don't do this, don't do that. When it comes to creeping animals and blood, don't eat it. Kohanim kids, don't become impure. So it's saying that, shouldn't we tell them everything? Why are we picking these specific things? But we're telling... And who are we telling? Who are the kids? The kids are not only the young children under bar and bat mitzvah, but it's also the child in ourselves. So when we're saying Emor, to say, we read this Parsha always in the month of Iyar. And what is the energy of the month of Iyar? It's this counting the Sphira and Lag bomer. And we read about Pesach and Lag bomer, and we warn the kids, we warn them how to behave. Make sure you pass this message on to the younger generation, meaning us also. And what is the message to the child within me? That we are receiving the Torah anew, and it's predicated on being present in your life. So in the Sphira, every day counts. The 7 weeks are the 7 emotions. They're inter-included. Also, we have the 7 branches of the menorah. And we include all 7 within ourselves. Iyar is the most powerful month for working on ourselves. And when you take to heart this place in you that can be more radiant and more polished. Again, we know Iyar is Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Rachel. The qualities of our matriarchs and patriarchs are brought out in a revealed manner. And their gift is the power, is giving us the power to be a chariot for God's will. And this month is the time for what we call avodas hanefesh, to work on ourselves. So we have Hod. The next 3 weeks are Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. The role of implementing the weeks that came before, of love and awe and beauty and perseverance. We are told to influence the younger ones and to influence ourselves. We're not warning them. We're making them shine. It's not like shaking your finger. It's, how you make someone shine. And to be radiant and to be lit up with this service of God. And God is close to us, and we choose God. And it says we want to be present in this month and refresh ourselves from this Sphira. So 1 second, I just okay. So I think we're going to end the Parsha there, and we're going to start on learning about Lag Bomer, the holiday of mystical joy. So I just want to start off. I don't want to make the assumption that everybody who knows who Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is. So I'm going to do it before we learn the deep words and teachings. I want to do a little background of Rabbi Shimon. As most people who attend this class know, that I spend my summers in Sfat. And right directly across from the porch of Ascent, where I sit and look over the mountain, is the mountain of Meron. And from my porch, we see the lights of Meron. And I once took a walk from Sfat to Meron. It was about a 4.5-hour walk going along the path of the Arizal, the way the holy Ari would walk when he went to Meron. And it was really quite thrilling to do that. It's always open. Anybody can come and do it. And my husband and I spent a lot of time in Meron by Rabbi Shimon. And, it's like I said to one of my kids, I'll babysit for your kids if you want to go out Saturday night. And they said, where are we going to go? There's really nowhere to go. But when you're in Sfat, where do you go when you have nowhere to go? Or when you want to go somewhere, it's not you have nowhere to go. You go to Meron. You drive over to Meron. It's a 15-minute ride. You take a book of Tehillim. You say a few prayers. It uplifts your soul. You drive back. So I want to say a little about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Meron. So on Lag Bomer, we're remembering Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai today. Tomorrow night is which is the 18th of the month of Iyar. That's the day he died, about 18 centuries ago. And my husband used to call Lag Bomer Haredi. Haredi means, like ultra-religious. Haredi Woodstock. Because close to 500,000 people come to Meron each year. Last year, I think they let 30 people in. It was totally locked due to COVID. And I don't know really what's going to happen this year because Israel is open, but whether they will have that many people remains to be seen. Now, you can go on the internet. There are ways, if you go on Ascent of Sfat, you can send your name in and somebody will take it to Meron and read it by the grave of Rabbi Shimon, or you can text me and I will pass that information on, or email me and I'll make sure that it's sent over and that your prayers get read. I was going to look up the address for everybody, but I forgot. And so you can have your prayers read in Meron. And, okay, so it says when Rabbi Shimon was a young boy, he studied in an academy that was called Yavna, that was founded by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he died at about the time Shimon was born. He's buried in Tiberias. And Rabbi Shimon's teacher was the famous Rabbi Akiva, and he had an academy in Bnei Brak. And he was persecuted. There was a Roman general, there was a Roman emperor, and he forbid people to study. He shut down the academies, and Rabbi Akiva wouldn't be stopped, and he continued to teach Torah, and he did it publicly, not in secret. And Rabbi Shimon stayed at his side, and he was arrested, and then he was condemned to a martyr's death, and he was murdered by the Romans. And these were very difficult times for the Jews. There was a lot of prosecution, and it was very difficult for the sages to study the Talmud, and it was on penalty of death if you studied, and the whole religious life was in danger. There were students that were ordained by a Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, and Rabbi Shimon was one of these 5 scholars that were ordained. And he escaped, but his teacher, Yehuda ben Baba, was put to death by the Romans. It was a very, very serious time. And there were decrees and a lot of brutality, and I'm just going to skip all the details. Anybody can go on the internet and read about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But he was overheard. There were a group of rabbis that were sitting around, and one was praising the Romans because the decrees became less harsh. And Rabbi Shimon said absolutely not, that they were horrible and it was a terrible thing, and it was overheard, and a spy heard it and reported him, and his life was in danger. And he and his son Reb Eliezer fled to a place called Pekian, which is up in the north, and they went and they stayed in a cave and for 12 years. And it says God caused a carob tree and a spring to appear right in front of the cave, and all they did was study for 12 years. They studied and they prayed, and they became the holy of the holies, as we say. And at the end of the 12 years, the prophet Elijah brought them the tidings that the world had changed, and the government was giving a reprieve, and they left the cave. And they passed a field where they saw Jewish farmers toiling the land, and they said, how could people be toiling the land when they're missing out on the sacred study of Torah? They saw with not a good eye. And when they uttered these words, the whole fields went up in smoke, and a heavenly voice said, did you come out of the cave to destroy my world? Go back to your cave. And they returned for another 12 months, and when they left it again, they heard a heavenly voice tell them to leave, and they came out with a different outlook on life. So one of the things we learn for ourselves from this is how we look at another person. we can look at another person, and it could be with a healing look, with a kind look, with a gentle look, or we can look with a non-healing look. So we want to remember this story, that we want to look at everything with that kindness, with that healing look. And then when they came out, they saw a Jew carrying 2 bunches of myrtle, rushing home on Shabbos, and he said he's going to adorn his house for Shabbos. And they said, well, why are you using 2 bunches? Why don't you just use one? And he said, one is for remembering the Sabbath, and the other is for keeping the Sabbath. And they realized that despite all the persecutions by the Romans, the Jewish people were still clinging to the commandments, and especially to Shabbos. So on the way, they met Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. Now, he was the father-in-law of Rabbi Shimon, and he is actually buried when you come into the cemetery in Sfat, not the cemetery where the Arizal is buried, but down below where my husband is buried, in what's called the New Cemetery. His kever is there, and it said that he is the tzaddik for the prisoners, that he helps release people who were imprisoned incorrectly, etc., etc. And I actually do know, I can't remember who it was, the last summer that I was I know who it was. So we have a relative, and his name is Avrami Richter. And he is a Chabad rabbi in Howard Beach, I think, New York, but he's also one of the only 4 federally appointed chaplains in the United States. And he's in a prison in upstate New York, about 2 hours away from where he lives. He goes 4 days a week there. And I once told the story of Moshe Rabashkin and him, and I have many stories of him, but Myrna, write those down. We'll tell him another time. But I remember that one year that we were there together and we had a family reunion, and he went to Sfat specifically to pray at the grave of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair to free a man who was unfortunately imprisoned for 20 years, and there was a small possibility he would get out, and he went specifically to pray there, and the man was released from the prison. So we want to. So it says that Rabbi Pinchas saw his son-in-law when he just was released from he was just released from prison, and from the cave, not from prison, and he looked so gaunt and worn out, and Rabbi, his father-in-law, burst into tears, and he consoled him, saying he could have never learned so much or achieved such a degree of scholarship and divine wisdom if you had not spent all that time in bidud, isolation. I hope most of us has used our time in isolation. I have to say the one positive thing of this year of kind of isolation, I mean, I wasn't in total isolation, thank God, but was doing a lot of Torah learning, having a lot of opportunity to learn with teachers that I normally wouldn't get to learn with. And tomorrow at 11:15 Pacific time, that's our time, Rebbetzin Yudas Golevsky from Shaviti is going to be doing a class on Rabbi Shimon and the light of Meron. So if you look up Shaviti on the computer, or you can text me and I'll send you the information. So to go on, it says Rabbi Shimon founded an academy, and he went on. I want to skip some of this information about him because I want to talk about some of his teachings. He was the author of the Zohar, which means brilliance, which is the mystical interpretations of the Torah and the chief source of the Kabbalah. And he was buried in Meron, and that's where people make a pilgrimage every year. So, but for any more details, you can go on the computer. Yes, Isn't that nice? So Lisa's saying, if it wasn't for this unfortunate situation, I would have never found your class, and I just moved here from LA. And the truth is, I would have never been teaching on Facebook. It was very hard for me to do it. I have to say, I overcame a lot to be so public. I always taught classes, and I had wonderful students, really wonderful students, many, many years. And I never did anything public like this. And it was really only because of the situation that I did, and it's really been a wonderful experience for me. It's reconnected me with people that I haven't talked to in years, and new friends, and I'm able to teach from wherever I am, and it's really been a very positive, that aspect has been very positive. I mean, for me, Baruch Hashem, we were fine and healthy, and so I can say it was positive. Not everybody had that same experience. So now it's very interesting because the Talmud is telling us how during these days between Passover and Shavuos, there was a plague. And the plague was on Rabbi Akiva, had 24,000 students. I wonder if I'm ever going to have 24,000 students. I don't think so. That he had 24,000 students, and they did not behave with the proper respect one to the other. So what does that mean? These were great, great people, like that each one thought their interpretation was the correct one, or their Rebbe was the correct one, and they didn't have respect for each other. This is a modern theme, unfortunately, of difference of opinions and not having respect, even enough to listen to somebody else's opinion. So it says, what happened to the 24,000 students that died? The plague that had hit them stopped on Lag Bomer. And we celebrate that day. And that's why during this time of the Omer, there are many mourning customs that are observed from the time that we begin the Omer because of the death of these students. But on the 33rd day of the Omer, the students stopped dying, and we celebrate the day as a holiday. And we celebrate the Yurtzeit of Shimon Bar Yochai, and there are a lot of festive outings and picnics and all kinds of things. And it's the time of unity and joy. And we bring the future into the present, because for Rabbi Shimon, the Beis HaMikdash was never destroyed. It's about living with joy. That was what he represented, living with joy. And that many, many Kabbalists, many great people came to his grave to be with him and visited his grave. And there were many miracles. I'm not going to go into them because I really want to get to some words of his teaching. But people light large fires. It was also the custom to take a 3-year-old boy there. So the custom is to let a boy's hair grow till he's 3, and then to cut and leave the payas so he understands the concept of payas. And I've had many grandsons whose hair cutting was at the grave of Rabbi Shimon. And on Friday, on Lag Bomer, my little grandson, Shlomo Yitzhak, is going to have his hair cut here in Los Angeles. We're not in Maron, but because it's Lag Bomer, it's the day between Pesach and Shavuos that we can cut hair. And so he's turning 3, and he's going to have his hair cut here in Los Angeles. We're going to cry as cute little curls and long hair. And then I have another grandson, Shlomo, who we were going to do his hair cutting in Maron at Shavuos time, but due to the restrictions on getting into Israel, that hair cutting will be in Miami. And but we do have a few more. Hopefully, we'll have a few more boys coming up. Not so many, but maybe a few, and then we'll get to Maron and we'll do the hair cuttings there. And it's a time of great celebration. People are so happy. I mean, I haven't been there on Lag Bomer for hair cuttings, but I've been there at other times with grandchildren. And it's, everybody participates and people are so joyous. And it's really, there's nothing like the Jewish nation. That's all I can tell you. So I'm not going to go into any of the miracles right here, but you'll have to trust me that there were many miracles that were done. The Arizal, on the first Lag Bomer that he arrived in Israel, he went to Lag Bomer, and he cut his first son's haircut was there right after, a few days after Lag Bomer. Oh no, on Lag Bomer. On Lag Bomer. And okay, so there's some other customs. There's customs of making bonfires, and we're going to learn why when we're going to study a piece of his Torah. It says that in the Zohar, it says that there was an overwhelming deluge of spiritual light that had such an effect on the world that the sun did not set until Rabbi Shimon finished conveying his wisdom on the day of his death. And there was a spiritual fire that surrounded his deathbed the entire day, and we light fires to commemorate the spiritual revelations that occurred on this day. We're going to go more into the day of his death. There's a custom of using bows and arrows on that day, and if we have time after we go into the teaching, then I'll go over it. But I really want to. There's so much to learn, and so let's just go on with the. I like the Kabbalah seatbelt teachings the best. Okay. So Lag Bomer is called a Hilula, which is like a wedding celebration, rejoicing of the yurtzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he passed away on Lag Bomer, and his close disciples were with him, and there was a mood of great joy because he kept teaching the mysteries of the Torah that were written down in the Zohar. And in a book called the Idra Sutta offers an account of the last days on earth. And I have to say, I am very fortunate that on my drive to Meron, on many occasions with my friends, the Trugmans, we stopped in the Baal Shem Tov forest and took a little hike to a little, I can't call it a synagogue, but maybe it was a synagogue, a little clearing, a little hut with this huge rock in the middle of it. And it says that the disciples of the Arizal, and not the Arizal, the disciples of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai used to go there. It's probably maybe an hour walk from Meron, and they used to sit together and study the teachings of the Zohar right there. And the energy there is absolutely spectacular. You must come with me to Israel. We must do all these wonderful things. So in this book, it talks about his last day on earth, and it says that all the true tzaddikim, righteous, rejoice in this wedding feast, in this Hilula, the joy of the wedding feast, and they're summoned to be present. That's what it was called, and that's what it is called, and that is why there's so much joy and celebration on Lag Bomer. It's just like the celebration before a bride and groom at a wedding feast. And it's called Hilula Rabbah, the great wedding feast of Rabbi Shimon. And there's a quote from the Song of Songs with which the Zohar comments on it in the words of Rabbi Shimon. Go forth, daughters of Zion, and gaze upon King Solomon, upon the crown his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, and on the day of the joy of his heart, from the Zohar. And when the funeral bier of Rabbi Shimon was taken out for burial, they heard a heavenly voice proclaim, "Ascend and come, gather for the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon." So Rabbi Avram Galanti, who is a disciple of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, who is buried right next to the Arizal, explains that the day of Rabbi Shimon's passing is called Hilula because on the day of his passing there is a shining, glittering, and an arousal of all the Torah and mitzvahs with which he was occupied during his lifetime. And they effect an immense, what's called a yikud, which is a unification in the upper realms. And it says that the daughters of Zion that we mentioned before refer to the souls of all the righteous, and King Solomon refers to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the sense that rabbis are called kings, and he is called peace because he makes peace on high. And it is stated, this is stated in the Zohar, and it says that he's called the Rashbi. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai not only rejoiced himself, but wanted others to rejoice with him on that day every year. And for the righteous, the day of their passing is a day of happiness. It's the culmination of everything of all their life in this physical world, everything that they have taught. And in Lag Bomer, therefore, the anniversary of his passing, it's a mitzvah to rejoice in the joy of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And it is a custom, if one can, to go to Meron and to be happy there with great joy. And one year, my husband and I were in Lag Bomer. We were in Hebron for Lag Bomer. My grandson, Shia Swerdlove, who just turned 20. I have to call him for his birthday. He just turned 20, but when he was bar mitzvahed at 13, we did the bar mitzvah that Shabbos in Meron, and on Saturday night and Sunday was Lag Bomer. And in the Lubavitch tradition, it says it is as important to light the bonfire in Hebron as it is in Meron. And my husband was given the honor to light the bonfire, that Lag Bomer in Meron. And it was just something very, very special, very, very remarkable. So we know that we have to celebrate with great joy. So it is said of this passing of the world, from the world, of a great tzaddik, of a holy person, of any person really, but that all of a person's work and toil throughout their lifetime are compounded on the day of their passing for the world, because this marks the end of the soul's spiritual work, of the soul of what the soul had to achieve in conjunction with that particular body. Even if that soul may have to descend again by way of reincarnation. So it says that everyone has to be reincarnated until completing the fulfillment of the 613 mitzvahs in thought, speech, and deed. And it says that the passing from this world represents the completion of that soul's avoda, that soul's spiritual work with that particular body. That is the definition of death. And this day has a special quality that transcends the spiritual work of the person's whole entire life, because everything comes together on that day. Like Rabbi Shimon finished his teaching, it says the sun didn't set, the day didn't end until all his teachings had been finished, and at that point he passed away on that day. And all of these doings are compounded into one, and there is an additional or light or quality or effect that transcends them all. And it's said that this is comparable to the letters of the alphabet, that every letter has its own meaning and its own effect. And when joining several letters, a word comes into being. So there's an addition of something new. What is that? The force that joins the letters together, and the meaning of that word, which is a light or quality that surpasses all the individual letters. It is likewise when there's an assembly of 10 Jews, every one of them has a divine soul, but when assembled together, there is something new, the indwelling of the Shekhinah, the presence of God, which occurs with the assembly of 10. So this day of Lag Bomer, the day of the Histalchus, the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that all of his work throughout his lifetime was extraordinary. And he said, I was bound to him, meaning to God, with one knot. My soul was united to him, burning for him. So it goes on to say, how much greater then was the quality affected on the state of his passing because of the advantage of the sum total and its additional light that transcended all. And it's also said of Moses, 50 gates of understanding were created in the world, and all were given to Moses except one. But at the time of his passing, he attained that 50th gate as well. It is written that Moses ascended unto Mount Nebo. Nebo is Nun Bo, the 50th gate was in him. Nun is 50, Bo is in him. The 50th gate was in him. And it says that it signifies he was given the highest level, which was the 50th gate of understanding. So now we can understand from the Midrash, for man cannot see me and live, that the holy angels who are capable of carrying, this is all Kabbalah seatbelts, who bear the heavenly throne are unable to see because they are below the firmament. So the Chayot are called the highest among the 10 levels of angels, and they bear the heavenly throne. And you would think only God is above them. In fact, it says there is another heaven above the heads of the Chayot. And it says, and over the heads of the Chayot, there was a likeness of a rakia, meaning a firmament. Worlds on worlds. And it says that that tzaddikim, the righteous, cannot see him, meaning God, when they are alive, but they can at their death. So if this holy class of angels, Phyllis is asking, where did 50 come from? So it says that we're working with, we're refining the middos, 7 middos in 7. There are 7 different categories, and there's 7 within 7, so we have 49 gates. And it said the 50th gate from Moshe was gifted to him. And how do we know that the 50 gates of understanding were created in the world? It says that he was given them all, 49, but only at the time of death he was given the 50th. And how do we know that? Because he died, he ascended to Mount Nebo, and Nebo is spelled Nun, with a Nun and a base, and Nun is the letter that stands for 50. And base is for in him, Bo. So it says the 50th gate was within him. So he achieved just like the counting of the Omer, the 50th gate was achieved within him. So, because it says that if the souls of tzaddikim are superior to the souls of angels, then they should be able to see God when they are alive, but they can't. So it says that at the time of the passing, there is a unique quality of the sum total with all its transcending light, meaning everything comes together, all the levels, level 1 through 50, anything a person does comes together, and this is the completion of their spiritual work in the world. So there is an incident related in the teachings of the Arizal about Rabbi Shimon. So there was a rabbi called Rabbi Halevi, and he used to recite a prayer. There's a special prayer called Nechem for the consolation of the mourners of Zion and Yerushalayim. It's usually recited on Tisha B'Av in the Mincha prayer. But there was this rabbi who used to recite it every day because he grieved so much over the destruction of the Holy Temple, and he yearned for its building. And when he said that prayer, so he said it every day wherever he was. Now he's at Lag Bomer at the grave of Rabbi Shimon in Meron, and he's saying it on Lag Bomer in Meron, and it says that this perturbed Rabbi Shimon. And it says that the Alter Rebbe is commenting, and he says, there are sublime souls of a select few individuals for whom the whole aspect of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was not actual, as if it never occurred. And this was Rabbi Shimon. He lived absolutely with the concept that there was no destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And Rabbi Avram Halevi was a disciple of the Arizal, and he must have known the significance of the Shimon Bar Yochai and what he believed, and of his passing, and he should not have been able to sense that level of destruction of the temple on Lag Bomer, because of all the accomplishments of Rabbi Shimon should have enhanced the light that was there at that time. And when you go, and you will go, to the kever of Rabbi Shimon, you can feel it, and that is why people go on Lag Bomer. I've been there a few days before Lag Bomer or a few days after Lag Bomer, and it is said that the 3 days before the Yortzeit of a Tzaddik and the 3 days after, there is a power at the grave that one can feel. And it says that there was a concept that was beyond, who he was beyond the reality of the destruction of the temple. Why? Because Rabbi Shimon's avoda was to infuse and to bring out the panemius of the Torah, the deep inner wisdom and the esoteric dimension of the Torah. And he also was an expert in the revealed, in the Nigla, in the revealed dimension of the Torah. But his greatest teachings that he's known for in the Zohar are the mystical levels of the Torah. And he brought this out openly in the world, and it says that this is connected to the tree of life. The tree of life symbolizes the panemius, the very core and soul of the Torah, where there are no problems and there are no disagreements, as opposed to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's the tree that Adam and Eve ate from, which symbolizes the body of the Torah, which is the revealed aspects like Torah and law, halakha, and those deal with sifting and clarification of what is permitted, fit and pure, and what is forbidden, unfit and pure, meaning the knowledge of good and evil. But the tree of life is about the panemius, the inner teachings. It does not have to deal with the levels of good and evil. I'm just summing that up actually rather quickly in my Kabbalah seatbelt mode, because there are a few other things that I wanted to speak about. This I am going to skip, and I'll do this one little piece, and then we'll go on and we'll conclude. So one of Rashbi's disciples went abroad and returned very wealthy, and the other disciples became envious. They also wanted wealth, and Rashbi took them to a certain valley. Now, a valley always represents something that is low, and it was a valley near the town of Meron, and it says here that Meron was the burial site of Shimon Bar Yochai, just like Mount Nebo was the burial place of Moses, with all that it meant. Okay, so he said, "Valley, valley, become full of golden dinars." I guess that was a monetary coin. And as the valley filled with golden dinars, he said to his disciples that each of them could take as much as they want, but they should know that they would be taking from their share in the world to come. And it says that from Proverbs, and she laughs at the last day, meaning all the rewards for the righteous are prepared for them in the world to come, and she laughs, she rejoices on the last day. And the disciples, it said, refrained from taking the gold. They didn't want to take from their from their future, from their future. Okay, so I just want to, I'm going to say a few maybe little disjointed things. That it says that no rainbow appeared in the days of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So it says, after the flood, God made a covenant with man and all living beings that he will never destroy the earth again. And he said, this is the sign of the covenant, my bow I have set in the cloud, and it should be a sign of covenant between me and the earth. So if the condition rises that there should be another reason to wipe out the earth, God will then put this sign of the rainbow, and he will say, remember the covenant. And but it says that during the time of Rashbi, because he was considered a perfect saint, that the rainbow never came. So I just want to say something. So there is a custom to use bows and arrows. The children use bows and arrows on Lag bomer. And so, and it's connected to this little piece of Torah. So it says that the first type of combat used to be hand-in-hand combat. Then when you wanted to have an enemy that was further away, a bow and arrow was used for that purpose. And it also is mentioned in the Torah that Yitzhak and Yaakov used bows and arrows. So what happens when you shoot an arrow and a bow? You take the cord of the bow, and the bow must be pulled toward your heart in order for the arrow to go far. And the more close to your heart that you pull the bow, the further it goes. So it says that one of the things it represents in terms of a person's spiritual work, in terms of Rabbi Shimon, is that it wipes out enemies that are apparent and enemies that are not apparent. Meaning you go deep, when it says you draw the bow to your heart, you go deep inside yourself to rid yourself of subtle enemies. And it says that the Ben Yisachar explains this whole thing about bows and arrows that are given to the children, because a bow is the word keshet and rainbow is keshet, that no rainbow was seen during his lifetime, meaning that it wasn't necessary at all if you to be reminded, because the world was so holy that it was not going to be destroyed during that time of Rabbi Shimon. But it does say in the Zohar that there will be an extremely bright, vivid rainbow before Mashiach comes. And it says that because of the mystical dimension of the Torah. Okay, so I have one more piece to go over that I studied with Fayumini this week, which was very, very actually interesting and exciting, if I can find it easily. Okay, here it is. So I'm just going to go back a little bit. The beginning of this week was Pesach Sheni, which means the second Pesach, when you have an opportunity. You didn't miss the opportunity of making that connection of faith and eating the matzah. So, and this week there's a lot happening. It's about being present in your life to what is going on. So, this week, the beginning of the week was Pesach Sheni. It was also the yahrzeit of Rabbi Meir Balanes, who is known for miracles. And I'm going to remind myself to tell a miracle story of Meir Balanes next week, okay? Because I want to tell a different story. I know you want every story, but you're going to have to wait till next week. Remind me, it's about the miracle of Meir Balanes and my daughter Aura and the car keys. Okay, somebody can remember that for me, okay? Because I probably won't. Okay, so it says that we don't want to miss anything that's going on now. You don't want to be left out. You don't want to be left behind. We got out of Egypt, which was the narrow place where we were imprisoned. And when we have Pesach Sheni, which was this last Monday, we have another opportunity to go out of narrowness. And we know that we say that every day we have to see ourselves from going out of Egypt. So every day we have that opportunity to go out of narrowness. And we're talking about the primacy of our soul. So on Lag Bomer, the highlight is the Yortzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a day of great joy, and the goal is to be one with God and to reach the completion of our work. And the work of Rabbi Shimon was Torah. Torah was what we call his craft. And Rabbi Shimon saw the world and through this prism, the prism of being connected to God, and he saw the truth in the world, and he was an elevated soul, and he gave us the Zohar. He was called the Moshe of his time, and you can look at his life and you can bring it into our own life. We learn from him. We have to learn from all of this. We have to, learn from these holy teachers. It is possible to emulate them. And there are many aspects to his Yortzeit. He always said, I am to my beloved, meaning connected to God. He wanted to be one with God all his days. He looked at the world with yearning. How can I be one with God? And his death, as we said before, was a halula. And we can say to ourselves, I am not Shimon Bar Yochai. How do you expect me to have these qualities? And it says a tzaddik, a righteous person, is the foundation of the world. And how can we strive to be who he is? It says there is a spark of Moshe in him, and there's a spark of Moshe in every person in us. So he makes the opening, and we can also yearn to be one with God. A person created and separate can do Torah and mitzvahs. And he did something new and unusual. He gave every Jew the power to invest their totality with the oneness of God. What do we see as an example? Hannah. So it says the story of Hannah, that she was praying, and Eli the high priest thought she was drunk, and she was drunk with prayer. She lost herself in her relationship with God, and we have the ability to do that. We can become unified in a wondrous unity with God through learning, which we're doing, and immersing ourselves in learning about Hashem. And everything we learn is to connect us to Hashem. Learning is not to increase our knowledge, but that learning should impact our life. That we should be soaked in this knowledge of Torah and Chassidus. This is the gift of Rabbi Shimon. To be one with God is one with his mitzvahs. This is the purpose of Torah. It is a wondrous unity that he gives us, the power that we know God's Torah, and we're supposed to find God in the Torah and connect to God and not learn it as a subject. It should be learned in order to do. It's not an intellectual subject. So we find Lag Bomer in the 5th week, and it says that that Rabbi Shimon nullified the wall between the inner and outer Torah, meaning between the panemius of Torah and the nigla, the revealed part of the Torah. And the panemius, that inner mystical teaching of the Torah, can heal the divide between the physical world and the spiritual world. He tells us there is no divide. It is all one. We are experiencing God in a way that is nourishing, and it's in our flesh and blood, and the message is godliness, that we should feel godliness. And that's why Hod Shebahod, which is the sphera of Lag Bomer, beauty of beauties. So it says the day before Lag Bomer, the 33rd day of the Omer, and I'm not going to say the day because I didn't count the Omer yet, but is Lamed Beis. So Lamed Beis is the heart of the Torah. Lamed Beis equals heart, and it's the number before 33, and that is called the heart of the Torah. So right now, tonight, we've entered into the heart of the Torah, and we become one by learning Torah, and that's what we've been doing this whole night. And we have to make ourselves radiant with it. that it's not a rule book and it's not a history book, and that the day that the heart of the Torah is revealed is the 17th of the month of Iyar, that's tonight, and 17 equals the word good, Tov. So the fundamental of the Jewish people is goodness and connecting to God, and we want to prepare ourselves to that, and we want to bring ourselves close to God. And it says that we're giving a message to the Kohen, because this Parsha also of this week of Lag Bomer is connected to the Kohanim, is the Kohen within us, that we don't count the days. We make the days count. So more than counting the days, we make the days count. And it's an idea of implementation. We want to experience it. We want to experience as closest to God, and we don't want to let anything dry up. So the message is to be radiant and to be new, and the unity of the Jewish people, and to have tremendous joy and a healthy mind, and to invoke this power of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And I actually have a story about Rabbi Shimon, and with that we'll end. So really, it is exciting. You can, I wish I was more internet savvy. And in fact, I have a new computer, and by next week, I'm hoping some nice person out there wants to help me turn on Facebook on my computer, because I think it'll be much easier to do it that way, but I haven't really mastered that yet. But why was I saying that? I can't remember. I don't even mind that I can't remember. I've accepted it. So I read this story today. Chaya Brocha Leida from Sfat sent it to me. I think Rabbi Tuvia Bolton, she took it from Rabbi Tuvia Bolton. It's an amazing, true story of Lag Bomer, a miracle story of Rabbi Shimon and Lag Bomer. So in May, in 1948, during the time of the statehood of Israel, I remembered, before I tell the story, find on the internet, please, go to Meron, go on Chabad.org. Maybe on Chabad.org, they'll have a link. There'll be a live feed link somewhere on your computer that will show you what's going on in Meron. You'll see the dancing, you'll see the singing, you'll see the bonfires. Now, right now, it is, it's 10 our time. Oh, it's Lag Bomer right there. It's 8 in the morning, I'm sorry. In another, 10 hours, if you go on, you'll see all the festivities, and it's going to go on all night till the next day. And please don't miss it, okay? Don't miss it. Okay, it's really exciting to see, even for a few minutes. Okay, so this story takes place. Yes, Phyllis, thank you. The Lost Keys is going to be next week, okay? Because I want to finish this teaching. I also want to say Mazel Tov to my daughter Aura and my son-in-law Dove, and to me, and to the other grandparents, for the upshurnish of our grandson Shlomo Yitzhak Ben Aura Mindel. That's going to be on Friday. Oh, Stephanie says to look at Arut Sheva, ARUTZ Sheva, for the coverage at Meron. Everybody, don't miss it. Really, you'll be very excited. Okay, so in 1948, in May, there was the horrible war of the Arab countries against the small state of Israel, and the Jordanian army surrounded Jerusalem and had Jerusalem totally sealed off. And any attempts to bring food or drink failed, and people were suffering. They were hungry, there was thirst, and it was a very, very dangerous situation. And there were a few hundred Jewish soldiers, but they only had very light weapons. And just a few weeks before in Kfar Etzion, the Jews were massacred. And this year, for the first time, I've been to Kfar Etzion because it's right next to Bat Ayam, where Miriam Rhodes lives. But the first time at one of my grandson's bar mitzvahs, I think it was about a year ago. Well, it couldn't be a year. It had to be 2 years ago. That I went to see the film at Kfar Etzion about the 6-Day War, and it was chilling. It was absolutely chilling about the massacre and the fighting and the courage of the people to hold the land, and it was just remarkable. And very sad at the same time. So the Jews of Jerusalem knew that there had been this massacre in Kfar Etzion, and there were very few weapons, and there was a massive Jordanian army that was facing them, and they had weapons, and they had tanks, and they were trained, and the first attempts failed to attack. They would have artillery attacking here and there, but they didn't try to totally wipe out the city, because they wanted those buildings. They thought it would be easy to conquer, and then they would have the buildings for themselves. So finally they sent in tanks and their artillery on foot, and there were 2 tanks that came in, and there was a very brave Jewish soldier that jumped on top of one tank. Luckily, it wasn't locked, the hatch. He lifted the hatch, and he threw a Molotov cocktail inside. He was unharmed. The Arabs that were inside jumped out. The tank blew up, blocking the road, and they all retreated. And every day there were deaths. Every day another Jew was killed. Many Jews were killed from the mortar fire. They were well organized, they had weapons, and they were highly motivated to wipe the Jews out and take over the land, as they unfortunately still are, many of them today. And that Thursday in May 28th, was going to be Lag Bomer. And so these Jews were all very committed Jews. They followed everything, they kept everything, and they wanted to make a fire and rejoice. Rabbi Shimon, how could you not be attached to Rabbi Shimon? How could you let the day of his Yortzeit, Lag Bomer, the holiday of mystical joy, just go and not recognize it? So they decided they would make a fire at night. But if they would make a fire at night, it would be suicide, because it would draw the enemy artillery, that they would see them, and they would know where they were, and they would know where to shoot. So in Jerusalem till today, the custom for lighting Shabbat candles is that you light 40 minutes before sundown. You don't light when we light normally here at sundown. You light 40 minutes before. So they decided that they would light 40 minutes before sundown, and then by the time the sun would go down, they would put out the fire. But at least they would have honored Rabbi Shimon. And so it says that 30 Hasidim showed up, and they brought little bags of oil, and they brought bundles of rags, a few pieces of wood, and they made a fire, and then they made a parade. And they were singing very quietly because they were fearful every step. And suddenly, the more they sang and the more they paraded around the fire, and the fire grew, the less fearful they became. And they began singing out loud. They were not afraid anymore, and they started to sing. And not only were they singing, they were dancing. And it was getting darker, and all of a sudden the fire opened up, and the artillery started shooting, and everybody ran, and they ran to different homes, and buildings were falling, and then 100 Jews rushed to the synagogue. And the person that we know this account from, his name was Rabbi Avram Yonatan Gottlieb. And he said that there was a rabbi that was in the shul. His name was Rabbi Zev Eisenbach, and he stood at the podium, and he read Psalm 91 times, praying and begging God. And another Jew, his name was Rabbi Eichler, came in with a bag of loaves of bread that his wife had baked, dipped in oil, to celebrate the meal, because you have to have a meal on a Yontif, on a holiday, on a celebration. So They wanted to complete the celebration. I mean, these people, like, what world do they come from? And so he gave out bread. And after 1 hour, the bombardment stopped. And it was totally silent. And then a soldier ran in yelling, "What did you do? Are you crazy? What did you do? Did you light the fire and sing? Was it you?" And then he said, "It worked. It worked." And what happened was that one of the Arabs that was left behind, so the Jordanians retreated. And this Arab told the soldier, when they heard the singing and they saw the fire, they became very confused, that it must be that the Jews were celebrating, that they had reinforcements and they had new weapons and they were going to succeed in wiping them out. And instead of attacking, they ran away. And all the shooting and the firing they heard was they were firing their cannons as they retreated to keep the Jews, who now they thought were strong and powerful, away from attacking them. And it was a miracle. And it was a miracle from Rabbi Shimon. And if it wasn't for the singing, they would have come in and killed everybody. And on the day after Lag Bomer, both chief rabbis of Jerusalem went out to the Jordanian camp. Remember, they had no way to fight them. They could only surrender. And they went out with white flags to surrender Jerusalem. And they said only on the condition that everyone leave unharmed. And everyone left unharmed. So there is a Hasidic axiom, and it says, a little light can dispel much darkness. If you have a totally black room and you light a match, that match can dispel the darkness. And it says, because darkness is really not a true entity. It is only the absence of light. So I want to thank everybody for coming to class. Once again, you all get an A+. And really go on a Route Sheva tomorrow. For anybody who wants to send in their name, I'm sure if you go on Chabad.org, there'll be a way to send your name to Maron, or go on Ascent of Sfat, ASCENT of Sfat, or you can send it to me, but send it early, and then I will pass it on to people in Maron, that they can pray for all of us, and that we have Mashiach, and that next year, maybe this year, maybe by tonight, we will all be dancing together in Maron. So thank you very much. Have a beautiful Lag Bomer, the holiday of mystical joy. The Happy Minyan is having a concert with the Moshav Band. You can go on the Happy Minyan for more information, and be happy. Do something fun on Lag Bomer. Okay, bye everybody.